Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the podcast video. So today we are going to talk about how to compose the podcast, specific formal elements, and how you can achieve the best results with the tools available to you. So remember that the podcast requirements are key to the larger website. So it's up to you. You can do a 5 to 7 minute with all three of you, or three individual 2 minutes, one each per group member. So if you would include one interview and then at least two citations from authoritative source material. So I know these are crazy times, so I invite you to find a guest expert who will count as one of your two authoritative sources. But if you can't find a guest expert, then a group member can play the part of the expert guest. You're going to want to use sound and musical cues. Want everybody to speak if you're doing the 5 to 7 minute. Embed the MP3 file or files with a 100-word précis of the podcast, and the podcast page to be accessible from each point on the site. So, why podcasts or why audio now? And so I think it's kind of interested that, podcasts as a medium use all sorts of communication strategies developed for radio in the last century. But that said, since audiences are likely to broadcast these audio texts from their phones and listen to them on earbuds or earphones individually, right, which is a thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about, like, who's my audience, how am I going to reach them, unlike radio, where by necessity, audio was a collective or group activity. A key difference, despite the formal elements of audio being drawn from like the radio techniques of last century, these are primarily individual texts, right? Okay, so as we get going, I want us to think about what can audio do differently than other mediums can do. And so to do that, I would like for you to close your eyes and listen to this audio file. Are you ready? Okay. So now that you've listened to it, I want you to just think for a second what sorts of images are conjured up when you listen to that file. What sorts of colors, shapes, places, figures did it evoke? What do you think was being recorded? And also, what type of emotional response did you have? Which is all to say, what does audio do to the listener? If you guessed coral reefs, then you were right. You just listened to the sound of a healthy coral reef. And then we can think, in broad terms, what does audio do to the listener? But then specific to our goal here, how does the sound of what is a healthy coral reef convey possibly the urgency or the importance of coral reefs to a listener broadly? So. Before we move on, here are a list of, and you can click into these in the video, or of course the SlideShare is also available in the Canvas module. Here's some resources. So the Sound Dictionary and the National Radio Day page are going to have some both suggestions for building podcasts and some specific sounds. Pixabay, the YouTube audio library, and 909 Music SoundCloud are going to have all sorts of, royalty-free music and audio. And then Storyblocks, Zapsplat, and Sound Bible all have royalty-free effects. So you can find all of that information linked here. And of course, you're welcome to use whatever sound or cues you want to. You might know this if you listen to podcasts. If you don't, I feel like podcasts fall out into these sort of 5 broad genres that you might want to remain cognizant of as you produce your own. So There's the interview. So that's sort of like kind of traditional journalism where you have a single author or a single interviewer interviewing an author or guest expert. The kind of solo podcast that can take the form of long form reporting or storytelling that makes its case through interviews, background, supporting evidence, etc. The panel show, right? So the panel show is going to be your kind of fan casts. I don't know if anybody listens to podcasts, that like recap podcasts, right? That's kind of the panel show. Those sort of conversational two best friends in a room in Miami talking about, I don't know what, urban development or mysteries, right? It's a popular uh, like My Favorite Murder is an example of those kind of conversational co-hosted. Those live and die by the relationship evinced between like the co-hosts. And then finally, these sort of short informative podcasts that we can talk about a little bit later, right? So, but quick audio content that spotlights a key topic typically within a larger context, right? Okay, so here are some sample podcasts that some of which are this is also posted in the Canvas module for this week. So again, we'll talk about the city a little bit later. This will take you to a web page with a bunch of different podcasts that this guy did with a variety of different experts from a bunch of different industries. Quickly, we might want to take a look actually at this Yale Climate Connections. So if you look, for example, I don't know. Here, let's look at the IPCC report one. So this is an example of if you were to produce the 2-minute podcast, any of these Yale Climate Connection podcasts are a good example for that. So I'm just going to play a couple minutes of this explainer on like what the IPCC reports are.
I'm Dr. Anthony Lazarus, and this is Climate Connections. When you read about climate change, you may come across mention of an IPCC report, but you may not know what that is or why it matters.
Assessments of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, are written by scientists who were nominated by UN member nations from around the world, basically tasked with providing the world with an objective scientific view of climate change and its impacts globally.
Virginia Burkett is Chief Scientist for Climate and Land Use Change at the United States Geological Survey.
Okay, that's probably enough. So you can hear, and if you have questions about doing the 2-minute intro music, the host announces who he is, attaches himself to an institution, which gives what he's going to say credibility, and then invites the guest to explain the very specific topic. So if you're going to do the 2-minute, think about what key detail you would like to explore further, and then to what extent within your broader website, and then to what extent does the key detail that you chose have a lot is best communicated through this sort of in this audio context. So, all right. Sorry, going back to here's some nonfiction and informal shows that are really nicely produced. So if you want some examples of what like high-end sound engineering sounds like, these are for you. This Floodlines podcast is narrative nonfiction and historical. It has does a lot of good work within sort of context and producing for the audience a kind of forgotten history. And then you guys might be familiar with Science Friday, which is part of WNYZ, so part of like the broader sort of like PBS ecosystem, but they have some really nicely produced both panel and investigation casts. So check those out if you want to. All right, so let's do a sample analysis of this trailer for this really great podcast made by USA Today about a illegal dump on Chicago's south side. So we're going to listen to the whole trailer, and then I will walk you through a rhetorical assessment of it. So.
There's this vacant lot on the west side of Chicago. It's about a half dozen miles from Chicago's downtown, what we call the Loop. And this lot is huge.
This lot looks to me like it's about a full city block. Like it's a big lot.
It's a big lot.
That's Gladys Woodson and Jacqueline Rodney, who live nearby.
And it's pretty overgrown. Like there's full-size trees, there's like prairie grass. So what did it look like when he was operating?
It was a mess. It was a mess. That's the best I can say for it.
I first started visiting this lot, which is in a neighborhood called North Lawndale, after hearing a story about something that happened here.
At first he had big 18-wheelers lined up. You know, I just thought, well, hey, somebody just parking their trucks in there. To a guy say, Miss Woodson, come down and look at this. Do you know somebody's dumping over in that lot?
I've been reporting in Chicago for more than a decade, and I've reported all kinds of stories about the built environment. About secret tunnels hidden underneath the Loop, and about how you replace a train bridge while the train is still running. I've also reported on housing discrimination and predatory lending, so stories about all of the remarkable stuff that gets built in Chicago, but also about how it gets built, and about all of the foul and crooked things that people will do when they think nobody's looking. And so the story of what happened on this lot, the story I want to tell you, stunned me despite everything I already knew about Chicago, about how corrupt and ruthless it can be, about how stark the divisions are between black and white, rich and poor, between the people who hoard power and the people who will fight for their fair share.
Anytime you see anybody drive over in a vacant lot in a limo, you know it's no good.
This story is about a giant illegal dump, 6 stories high.
It was huge mountains, concrete, garbage.
Built from the broken pieces of a city in the midst of a so-called renaissance.
I thought that downtown, City Hall, would do right by the people. You know, I didn't think they'd care less about us.
And built not just by dump trucks and bulldozers and construction cranes, but also by corruption, apathy, and greed.
So I said, okay, if a public official came by today and said, I need $500, what would you do? And he reached into his back pocket and he pulled out 5 $100 bills.
The man who built this dump had deep ties to Chicago's criminal underworld.
He looked at the owner of the restaurant. He goes, if you don't pay your milk money, you're going to get a pineapple through the window.
He profited at the neighborhood's expense.
Well, no, all the boys at this fucking table. Let's put it at the table here. I made a lot of money over there.
And before he was done, the FBI would be protecting him. I'm Raman Amer, and this is The City, a new podcast from USA Today, coming September 24th. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
Okay, sorry about the F word, forgot about it. All right, so just thinking, I know that's a trailer, but obviously we're not going to sit here and listen to like a hour-long podcast together. Let's think a little bit about audience. So why does the podcast hold my attention, keep me listening? How do I know it covers the topic I'm especially interested in? And I think things that she does in the intro are we're drawn in by the multiple voices, by the ways in which the podcast is able to establish this image, right? Which is like a kind of complicated like data visualization image interactive app. Through sound cues, right? So not only am I in the city, but I know that because of like the whooshing car noises. You can expect that your audience is gonna wander, their attention's gonna wander off, and that you can use those transitions to draw their attention back to what you're saying. And then finally, and this is key, The narrator introduces herself, who she's reporting on behalf of, introduces the topic more than once. And so keep in mind with audio, you have to keep repeating to the audience key terms and who's speaking before they speak. You can think about like the structure in a number of different ways, but again, right, she kind of opens with a kind of cold open, right? So you're in the studio, and then you're out at the site, and that isn't this an interesting topic? But it waits a minute to transition into the experts, right? Who the people from the neighborhood who have expert information and background, and then she introduces herself and her credentials. And it's only toward the end that she's going to make this like explicit claim about the problem before transitioning into asking you to listen. In your even in the 5 to 7 minute and in the 2 minute versions, you're going to want to get to the point a little bit quicker, but opening with a sort of cold open that whets the audience's appetite, only then to turn into both here's the problem and my claim about its solutions is a good way to chunk out the opening and then more broadly the text itself. All right, so right, whooshing cars. There's that moving from the transition, moving from inside to outside. That intro music theme, and then she uses that kind of juxtaposition between the expert testimony of the people who lived near the dump and then went to fight it with that old audio recording with the expletive in it. Sorry about that. Keep in mind that you want some sort of intro, maybe with sound cues, that sets us up, and then an outro. So don't just end at the very end. You want to, wrap it up somehow, maybe by saying like, I don't know, a sentence or two about this is what you just listened to, and this is why, and you can point your audience to further information. And you might also want to include some sort of sound that closes this out, right? Okay, so regardless of the genre of the podcast you produce, remember that you want to ask yourself, how well does the podcast use the affordances of the medium? How well are you using the structure to keep audiences engaged, right? Are you introducing who's speaking? Are you using transitions? Are we clear about what segment we're in and why, and how the segment relates to the other segments in the broader text? Are the cues consistent? Is the volume consistent? So keep that in mind. And then you might want to say, just keeping in mind, don't just drop off a cliff at the end. You want like an actual conclusion. Okay, so this week I'm asking you to produce a double column script. So double column scripting is typical for outlining or like storyboarding, right? Both audio and video. So the basics are on the left, you're going to put the production instructions, and then on the right, you're going to put the copy. Just keep in mind that it takes about a minute to say 130 words. Does your podcast script have to be identical to what goes into the podcast? So no. Think of the script as a rough outline that you can use to stay on track when you're recording. It's a process document that you can use to help guide workflow as you produce the text. But then keep it, and then you can use it on the back end after you've recorded the audio to edit. But you just keep in mind that, kind of like I said a bit with the podcasts need to be kind of light and conversational, and so your audience is not going to be as engaged if you are just simply reading off of a script or cue cards, right? All right, finally, I recommend GarageBand and Audacity. I posted a couple of YouTube videos that support those tools in our module for this week in Canvas. But just like everything this semester, if you're more comfortable using a different type of audio tool, you are welcome to it. Okay, that's it for me. If you have questions, just let me know. And then this slideshow is, like everything else, posted on or uploaded to the Canvas website. Thanks so much.